Hello. We all here?
Most of us.
How's it going? Okay. I see Seth's handsome face, but come back to us, Seth. All right. Seth is coming, I'm sure. Here we go. There we are. We got you back. Oh, hang on. Let me stop my YouTube. Technical foul. Isn't that just nice? Oh my goodness. There we go. How's that? Could have been nice background music, but okay, guys, welcome to Grace City, Portland's Grace Extras. This is our second week in a row. And if you're with us for the first time, thank you so much for joining us online. We're really excited to be doing this. I have some very special people with me this morning, some people that I consider to be good friends and leaders that I really look up to. The topic tonight, the thing that we're going to be talking about is preparing for leadership. And this is a conversation that we are doing or having in conjunction with a whole series of teachings that we've been doing as a church that we've entitled Preparing for New Life. And we just feel like this is a season for all of us, wherever you're coming from, whatever you do, where it kind of feels like life is on hold a little bit. And instead of just stalling, instead of just killing time, waiting for like life to kickstart again, we feel like this is a time when we can really think about how might we use this time to prepare for good things ahead, life on the other side of quarantine. So that's the basic idea. And a few weeks ago, we actually sent out a survey to our church, Grace City in Portland, just asking the question, is there any particular topics that you would like to hear about if we were to do some like bonus sessions in the evening or something? And leadership, this was one of the most asked for subjects that our church wanted to sort of hear some people talk about. So that's what we're doing tonight. We're talking about what it looks like to prepare for leadership. And so before we get too much further along, I want to go ahead and ask our guests tonight to introduce themselves. So if we can just go around, tell us your name, where you're coming from, or your leadership role, and one thing that you enjoy about leading. Greg, shall we start with you, and then we'll go to Seth and end with Hanna.
Great. Hey there, everyone. My name is Greg Mitchell. I pastor in a church in Vancouver, Canada. Lots of fun. We planted this church about 20 years ago, so that's a good chunk of time. And my favorite thing I really love in leadership, helping people connect their real lives to the gospel. I just love helping people make that connection, see Jesus in their real lives.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks for joining us from Vancouver, BC. Whoa, Seth, what's going on?
Couldn't tell you.
Talk to us.
Oh yeah. Yeah, what's up, everybody? My name's Seth. I'm pastor of Grace City in Corvallis, your mothership, and something like that. That church has been going quite a while, since the early 80s, but I've been the pastor of it since 2007. And favorite part of leading, I think it's really cool seeing people's lives change, and getting to have a hand in that, getting to participate in what God's doing in people's lives is super fun.
Cool. Okay, will you be stealing all of Greg's answers, or?
I'm just gonna make them sound better.
Great.
You're gonna make them more American.
There you go. There you go. All right, Hanna, talk to us.
I'm Hanna. I am the worship director at our church here in Portland. And I think it's really cool that after we've practiced something and we put it into motion, and we really like take it to heart, like how that can just empower and just like flourish a community or a people, and especially with my team, just seeing them feel emboldened to just, I don't know, for worship, for musical worship, it is a little bit empowering for them to take a moment of maybe spontaneity and really embrace what the Holy Spirit is doing. And that only comes with being able to trust each other. That comes with the practice and stepping into saying yes. But that's a very cool thing that I get to see a lot as a leader.
Very cool. Thank you. All right. Well, I guess I'll give it a go quickly. Obviously, my name is Simon. Well, I don't think I've introduced myself. My name is Simon, and I am the pastor of Grace City in Portland. I serve alongside Hanna as the lead pastor here. And I think one of the things that I love about getting to lead is I feel like occasionally I get a front seat sort of peek at God really, well, as you guys have said, God moves in someone's heart and they get a revelation, or they experience a new aspect of God, or they begin to take some steps themselves and grow in their influence and their own leadership role in life and in the church. And I don't know, I feel like one of the great honors of getting to be in a leadership position is you get these little up close looks at those moments. Sometimes it feels, like you get the special sneak peek, even though maybe you didn't actually even do anything. You get to be there right up close. It's very special.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you guys. We have some questions that we're going to work through tonight. In fact, this past week we put a little questionnaire out, and we had some fantastic questions submitted. And so we're going to take the next about 50 minutes or so. We'll go just under an hour, and we'll see how far we get. We may deviate and go into all sorts of interesting different directions, but we're going to work through some of these questions because they are fantastic. And I personally am quite anxious to hear what you guys have to say about them. I did send these questions to you guys last night, so you've had just like a little bit of time to ponder them, but I wanted to make sure that they were relatively fresh for us, because this is really more of a conversation than us just taking turns giving presentations. So with that, first question: what leadership advice would you give yourself 20 years ago? And Greg, I'm gonna shoot this one to you first. 20 years ago, just planting the church that you now lead in Vancouver, BC, if you could go back and give yourself some advice as a leader, what would you say?
20 years isn't as remarkable for me as it is for other people. That's kind of,
all relative.
That was, it's not, kind of halfway through. I think, I've had a couple hours to think about it. So I think it would be to think multi-generationally. So I think that when I first started in ministry, I really thought that ministry was mostly about me and who I was going to help and who's going to help me. And it really just revolved around me. And I was really excited to be helpful, but I didn't understand that I was coming into something already going, and then I'm going to end and something's going to continue on after me. So I didn't see myself in a wider kind of multi-generational process. And so I find that as soon as I do that, my values and job description really change a lot, where it's not just so much about me being fulfilled, it's about me being part of this relay race in a sense, which produces humility. It helps me take responsibility for the part that I have. And I just think it wraps kind of my stuff in a healthier context that I find really helpful. So that'd be one thing I think that I would tell myself.
That's worth writing down for sure. Who wants to go next? Hanna?
Well, I don't know about 20 years ago, but I can speak on what I wish I
You are in your 20s, aren't you? You're very young leader.
Not in my 20s anymore.
Are you not? Okay, all right.
So,
I was being sincere. I thought you were in like late 20s. What do I know?
Thank you. Yes.
Go on.
But
Okay,
I
10
do-
years. 10 years. Let's say 10 years. Sorry, I'll stop interrupting.
Yes. So I was thinking about that question because I have thought recently a lot about what I wish I would have known in my 20s, and how it would have really just gave me peace to be where I was at that time. And I'm going to quote my husband, because in construction, I'm thinking about our house now because we built our house, but he always says it's going to take longer than it takes. And, or it's going to cost more than it costs. Everything costs more than it costs and takes longer than it takes. And what I mean by that is, when I was 20, 18 to 20, I thought, or even like say 15 to 20, I thought those were the years I had to make it, or else my life didn't count and I wasn't going to be successful. I wasn't going to have a voice that was qualified to be heard, all those things. Because you see these people's 15 minutes of fame, or you see these incredibly talented people, and they're making it, but you don't know how long something takes, and you don't know the timeline for your own life. And I wish I would have understood that earlier, because it might have emboldened me earlier to start walking in the way I should have walked. Because Jesus calls every single one of us. He wants to call every single one of us to live an empowered and I feel like a thriving life in his kingdom and in the work that he's created for us to do. And it takes sacrifice and a lot of years, and you don't know how long it's going to take. And that's requires faith. That requires a lot of things, but you've been gifted in your own way, in your own purpose. And Jesus Christ equips you and empowers you. And in that, there's incredible grace, because you have the space and the time to do what you need to do, but it's not going to look like somebody else. And I was constantly comparing myself. So if I could even gone back to high school and said, hey, I missed out on that scholarship, or I did this wrong, or I did this right, there's still time for me to do and be who God wants me to do and be. And that would have helped my teenage years greatly. So I don't know if that answers
Really
the question.
good.
That's very good. In fact, I'd love to just sort of interject on that point and kind of build on what you said a little bit. And then I'm gonna hand over to you, Seth. But because I actually jotted down a little thought for this question myself, and I think if I was to go back in my early 20s, I became a Christian when I was 24, so early to mid 20s, and I found myself surrounded by a handful of leaders that I really, really looked up to. I don't know if they were like particularly exceptional leaders, or if it was just, I had never really been around Christian leaders, but I was enamored with some of these leaders in this little church that I was a part of. And I think in a lot of ways I had some unhealthy sort of expectations, or the way that I viewed leaders. And I think if I would go back now, I would want to give myself the advice to say, enjoy your leaders, appreciate them, look up to them. They're great, they're wonderful, they're gifts, but don't deify them. Don't compare yourself to them. Don't try to be them, because I'm calling you to follow me. That would be, I always think to what Jesus said to Peter at the very end of the Gospel of John. They're walking down the beach, and Peter looks back and he looks at John, and what about this guy? And Jesus says, what about this guy? You, Peter, you follow me. And I think that's probably the advice I would want to give myself. Don't deify your leaders. Don't demonize your leaders. They're important, they're good, but follow Jesus. Make him, if you're going to obsess over anyone or deify any leader, do that to Jesus.
That's good.
Seth, tell you what, let me put a little twist on the question for you, because the next question is very much connected, but I suppose it's about the same question, but just a bit more general. what the question is this: what can a young aspiring leader do to prepare for leadership now? So whether this would be like you giving yourself advice 20 years ago, or just a young man or young woman, in your case, a young man, what advice would you give to a young leader now to prepare for leadership?
Yeah, I guess I could overlap those a little bit in terms of my own leadership journey and what I would say to someone younger. I think the biggest thing that I see in young leaders is you just like go fail at stuff, like go do scary stuff as much as you can, as often as you can. I'm most grateful for the scary things, that I said yes to, that I either succeeded at and were amazing, or failed at and just learned a ton from. But I feel like fear is just by far the greatest limiting factor to our lives generally. So I look back, and all my best memories are scary moments where I usually said yes to something that was scary. So for sure, that's a big one. And I think that just means like when you're young, you don't have a clue, like truly like who you are. So just have the courage to try stuff. And I've interacted with a lot of young leaders that sometimes want to dismiss different aspects of whether it's ministry or leadership, maybe because it's not their wiring, or maybe because they are afraid or intimidated. And I say just go for it. Just try stuff, put yourself in a lot of unique environments and experiences, and just learn as much as you can from it. But overall, the biggest thing is, man, just go serve. Like, if you're concerned about leadership, you're usually worried about your own platform and your own resume and your own life, and the opinions that other people have of you, your own reputation, like your own brand. Like, if you're like, that's not it. Like, just go serve. And if you just think of any need and go meet it, and stop worrying about how big it is or who's going to notice you doing it, and just go do it. And that's where leadership should begin. I'm really thankful for the leaders I had in my life. That's right where they pointed me to. And I look back now, and there's probably a lot more value added sort of things I could have done with my talent, but they really developed me to be a servant leader, in the sense of, scrubbing toilets and stacking chairs, and see a need, fill a need. And so by far, that's the greatest thing you can do, for sure, early on in leadership. And because that's the heart you're going to need to actually serve Jesus and other people other than just yourself.
Fantastic. That's really good.
Really good.
What do you believe are some of the greatest misconceptions about leadership? Greg, let's go back to you.
Yeah, I think there's just so many different kinds of leaders. And so I think, Hanna, what you were saying about, we can kind of have a caricature of what we think a leader should be like, and then try to live up to that. And that never goes really well. I think that when I hear people talk about leadership, I mostly hear them talk about skill sets, competencies. And that's, I think, really important. I also hear them talk about charisma. I'm still looking for that. It's on my bucket list. I'll have charisma someday. But I think the main thing for me is a heart that is involved in other people's lives. So when I think about that how would a young aspiring leader prepare for leadership? I think you involve yourself in people's lives. And I think it goes off of what Seth is saying, that's maybe the most scary place to be, is to involve yourself in other people's lives. But I think sometimes leaders step over being involved in the mundane reality of people's lives and of their own relationship with God, and kind of skip over that and have a ministry position. And so I don't think I think it starts with learning how to love people in Jesus' name. And then if you can do that with individuals, then maybe you can do that in a small group, or in a ministry team, or in a wider church setting, or even in the marketplace. But I think it starts with walking with people through the difficult moments of life and helping them find Jesus there. And then that just becomes the foundation for anything that you'd want to teach, any way that you'd want to shape a ministry area. To me, it all comes from having experience walking with people. And I worry sometimes that there's this, that leadership is kind of one step above involving ourselves in people's lives. We're a little bit more efficient and kind of beyond that. We're working with teams, but at the end of the day, it's just always individuals finding Jesus. And if we don't practice just how to be in their lives, ask meaningful questions, mourn with those who mourn, rejoice with those who rejoice, help them find Jesus, then a leadership position that somebody gets always seems to be a little suspect to me. I just wonder whether they didn't skip a step. And so that's what I think about.
That's good. It's really good. It's challenging. Misconceptions about leadership. Hanna, Seth, either one of you guys want to jump in on it, build on that, or perhaps share another thought? Can you think of any misconceptions that perhaps you personally had, sort of in your younger years or early days of leadership, and you were rudely awoken to the reality of leadership?
Yeah, I think, I can only try to add to what Greg is saying. So I think what he's saying is probably the most foundational part of it. But I think that the misconception that a leader is the one that knows the most in the room, or that the leader has to know the most or has to be even the best at something in the room. I think that has nothing to do with it now. I think I would have thought that more so younger. And, I'm more of a 5 on the Enneagram kind of guy anyway. And so, really stockpiling loads of information and resources and books and examination of other leaders and podcasts and so forth, all in preparation for the hypothetical, moment where an issue might arise. And I just realized that, a leader really isn't the one that knows the most. They're able to, I think, maintain a calm presence among a team that's going to draw out the best of that team to rise in that moment. And I think that's the nature of life. I don't think it's pre-scripted. I think it's about being in the moment and utilizing all that God has done in you and the wisdom that he liberally provides to you in that moment to be able to make selfless decisions that are in alignment with what the Spirit's doing. And I think so many leaders just panic and go have sleepless nights and probably read too many books, just filling themselves with all these what ifs, when I think that it's far more about their presence and connection to their team and willingness to work through problems and situations. That even if you could read the best possible book on how to help someone walk through like depression or something like that, but once you get an actual real depressed person, like they're not going to be a clinical case study. They're going to be that individual person that's going to have their own unique backstory and issues, and you're not going to be able to slap like a nice, easy template onto everybody. And so while all those things are helpful, like for sure, I think that they are for sure overvalued in terms of what it means to love people and to walk with people and to trust Jesus in a moment.
If I can just jump in on that, Hanna, if you don't mind, I like to think about what my position is in relation to the person that I'm serving. And I have always assumed, Seth, like how you're talking, that my position was always to be in front of them and kind of give them directions on how to get toward where I am, because that's obviously better, which is a joke. But it was always ahead of them, or maybe even behind them, kind of pushing them forward. And Seth, when I hear you talk, it's like we're walking alongside people. And that to me seems like such a better position of leadership, where we're just trying to all get to Jesus together, instead of thinking that as a leader, I'm somehow farther ahead and that's what qualifies me. I think it's more about where we're setting our direction, and walking alongside seems to be a much better posture in leadership. But Hanna, maybe you have something to add.
No, I liked what both of you guys were saying, and I kind of wanted to go back a minute, if you don't mind, about Seth was talking about fear and failing. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that often I still catch myself is feel like you have to have it all together. If you're a leader, you have to have it all together. You have to be composed. You do have to be calm if you're leading other people, but you don't have to have it all together all the time. And it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to show vulnerability, because I think that it makes you more human. It makes you approachable. And if we're talking about leadership in the sense that we are to lead people to Jesus, if we're calling people to come with us on this journey and disciple and lead people to Jesus, we must be exposed and available to discuss things with. And you can't do that if you have it all together and you have this face on. And talking about fear, I think, and I love what Seth said, I think it's so important to find yourself in the failing, like to fall on your face, figure out where you are, because there are motives to be a leader, and some motives are wrong. Some motives are not out of a heart posture of worship. Some motives are self-serving, and those motives will become exposed, but they'll also, in the long run, they will not give you what you're looking for. And so I don't know, when you're thinking about like someone who wants to become a leader or do something in leadership position, your heart posture has to be that of one that's not self-serving. It can't be of yourself. And so getting to know who you are, that's where I was going to it. Getting to know who you are, what you're afraid of, because fear is a good motivator. Fear is a good motivator for you to cover up. Fear is a good motivator for you to not serve. Fear is a good motivator for you to never show your gifts, because what if you fail? What if you look bad? What if someone laughs at you? Those kinds of things. And I think there are so many leaders potentially who could thrive if we were to like, what's the Bible verse? You guys are way better than I am, but like, God did not give us a spirit of fear, right? But yet we live in that so often. And if we as leaders are able to speak that over our team or whoever is around us and empower them to not live in that spirit of fear, like greatness can happen, even in the mundaneness of life. So it just kind of changes your mindset, I guess, a little bit.
It's really good.
Yeah, that's great. Hanna, you're basically describing me in so many ways. I'm listening to you guys, I'm thinking, and I remembered this bit of a formative moment. I was at the Whiteside Theater. Adrian Crawford had preached that morning. I think it was the first time maybe I'd met him, and I was chatting with him. And he's kind of a big guy, and he's pretty intense. And he was looming over me, and he looked me right in the eyes, and he said, "Simon, what is your greatest fear in life?" And I was just trying to chat with the guy. He's super nice, but he asked me this intense question. And of course, we were just getting ready to go and plant Grace City in Portland. And I didn't have to think hard at all. So my greatest fear is that I'm just going to fail. Like, I'm just going to fall flat on my face, and everyone's going to realize that I'm utterly clueless, that I'm not a real leader. And that's it. That's my greatest fear. And I think in a lot of ways, that is still a very real fear. My misconception in terms of leadership, I think then 20 years ago as well, and to some extent even now, is that it's easy to think that someday I'm going to arrive and I'm no longer going to like feel these feelings of trepidation. I'm no longer going to have moments where it's like, wow, I don't have the answers. Like I keep thinking that somehow someday I will arrive, and then I will be as confident as Seth Trimmer. I will be as smart as Greg Mitchell. I will be as amazing as the leader that I've been looking up to for the last 20 years. And then I'll just be like Mr. Confident that walks into the room and knows exactly what to do all the time. And I'm 45 now. I'm still waiting to become that person. And I'm beginning to think I'm nenever going to become that person. I'm
Happens at 46. It's 46 is
the
magic number.
Thank God, because the anxiety is killing me.
Yeah, there you go.
But I feel like God is helping me to realize, like, so much what you guys are saying, that like actually I don't have to be anyone other than myself. I don't have to have all the answers. I don't have to feel like nothing shakes me, nothing rattles me. But I'm here to actually walk alongside of people, encourage people, embrace the team that God has brought around me, and habitually allow Jesus to lead me into situations where I actually need to trust him and rely on his grace. It's utterly nerve-wracking and really, really wonderful to trust Jesus in that way.
What strikes me when I hear you guys talk about fear, which I think is the main thing that undermines healthy leadership, is that fear is, unhealthy fear at least, is almost always self-centered. And so when I'm afraid, usually I'm thinking about me and my performance and how I present. And for me, an unhealthy fear and self-centeredness are really closely related to one another. So when I start to feel afraid, I assume that I've somehow taken my eyes off of Jesus. I've somehow made this moment about me instead of about those I'm serving. And that's just destined to fail. And so for me, fear has kind of become a warning light that there's something going on in my heart, that I'm somehow making this about me instead of about Jesus or the people that I'm serving. So that's how I view that.
I'm just going to go right deep into my soul now. Great. You guys want to go on to the next question? Now, this one, I could not think of an answer to myself personally. I'm hoping one of you guys have a good one. Funniest leadership moment. Can you think of your most embarrassing, funniest? I know you got a couple, Greg. You've got to have a couple. What do you guys think? This was a real question. Someone asked your funniest leadership moment. So let's break it up. I knew you'd have. I knew at least you would have one, Greg.
How do you be funny? How do you be funny?
If he would like to relive
on
them.
the spot. Yeah. I just say one that came to my mind. I was doing a wedding, and I was team doing it. So with another pastor, and he had on a lapel mic. I didn't. And just as the service was starting, one of the groomsmen became very, very sick. And so kind of doubled over, feeling nauseous. And so he took this guy into the bathroom to kind of help him recompose himself, but he didn't turn off his lapel mic. And so I'm the only face that 200 people can see. And everybody is hearing over the sound system, put your head between your legs. and you hear toilets flushing and all kinds of things. And they're all looking at me. And so I tried to be a stand-up comic for a few minutes.
Yeah.
To relieve the pressure, but that was a little embarrassing.
Classic.
And when the toilet flushed, I says, I think they're coming back. And so, and they did, and that was good. There you go.
Love it. Hanna, you got anything?
Yeah, I do.
Yes.
But I'm not gonna like elaborate because it's still really embarrassing. But
Is it fresh? Is it slightly fresh? Still tender?
No, it's not tender.
Okay,
It's hilarious.
okay.
And if any of my teammates watch this, they will know what I'm talking about. But we had thank goodness it was a Tuesday night practice, not an actual Sunday morning. But I'm still like relatively new with how I want to move the team to go into a transition or do a certain thing again. And sometimes the hand signals get a little weird because I just do my own thing. And I will not go into details, but during the practice, I made a very inappropriate hand signal. That was just not good. I was like, we'll never do that again. I'm sorry, we stopped, we prayed.
Wow.
And yeah, we just moved on, but it was good. It was a doozy.
Yeah.
But you definitely cannot show us the hand signal now?
I will not show you.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yep.
Seth, you got anything?
Seth has nothing. He walks on water a little bit.
Yeah, I'm above all this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. It's hard to think of like an embarrassing, like leadership moment, like embarrassing, like failures for sure. I think that, there's tons of communication gaffes, The most recent of which was a few weeks ago. I in my sermon I said that I just turned 40 this year, and I talked about how I'm really feeling 40, but instead of 40 I said farty. So I'm really feeling farty these days. And I caught it, but not quite in time to correct it. And so it was kind of, well, do I acknowledge it or just keep going? And I just kept going.
Mm-hmm.
So, and now it's out there on the internet. You can go enjoy it. You can
Sweet.
go enjoy my fartiness if you'd like. Yeah, I've got plenty of those. I mean, early on, I remember giving one of my more emotional, kind of deeply personal sermons. And I remember stepping off the stage, and you feel very vulnerable, very naked, in those moments. And I stepped off the stage, and one of our young, great leaders stepped up to me, and I was just convinced, like, oh, he's ready to, receive ministry, or really, like, God's really moving in his heart. And he just kind of leaned in really close and said, "Seth, your fly was open the whole time." Anyway,
Oh yeah, I love it. Oh, that's so
great.
good. I remembered a couple now just listening to you guys. I'll share one. I just moved to the UK, and I was still figuring out the language and certain words, even certain hand gestures. I remember I was probably like 1 week into the UK, and I saw a buddy of mine from across a crowded room, and I was kind of up on some steps overlooking the crowd, and I shouted out to my buddy. His name was Franz. I'm like, "Hey Franz, what's up?" And I gave him this piece, right? "What's up, homie?" Like, no big deal. But in the UK, that may have very well been the gesture you're referring to, Hanna.
I don't know. I don't know what
this is if you're in the UK, forgive me. This was a very rude hand gesture. And there was some words used as well. In fact, there was a sermon that I preached. I suppose I could say it here. We are in America, but I used the word bollocks. I had no idea what the word meant. But as it turns out, in the UK, it is extremely inappropriate. So there you go. Forgive me if you're British, and sorry. It happens.
That's great.
Okay, here's a serious question. We'll go back to serious for a second. So as a leader, this is the next question. How do you balance encouragement and constructive criticism? So I'm assuming this is in the context of you're leading someone, you're having a conversation with them, or a team, whatever, and how do you balance your encouragement versus your constructive criticism?
So I think as a leader, actually, these are really important things. The first thing you have to obviously model is actively receiving it, and to make it, create as much of an open, non-defensive, safe atmosphere to people to be as honest with you as you can. If people don't feel safe to share what they honestly think, you're tanked. Like you're really hosed, as a leader. So inviting it, even being self-deprecating and inviting people's, feedback into that is all really helpful. But the general rule with encouragement, in any sort of correction or criticism, this is true in marriage as much as it is in church or anywhere that I can find. It should be, at least a 10-to-1, if not a 20 or 31 ratio. So you're just feeding constantly into the encouragement bucket, because everyone has a deficit there. And when you're doing that consistently, you just got to be courageous enough to have the correction moments when you need it as well. But if you're modeling it, receiving it, as much as you can, and then you're pouring out encouragement as consistently as you can, it'll still be challenging and hard for people to hear, but that's at least as good as you can do, I think, for an environment that'll help people receive it.
That's great. Yeah, I was just going to say something similar. I don't know that I would aim to strike a balance. I think it's more like encouragement is gold. Encouragement needs to be the language we're all speaking fluently, and then absolutely having enough love and courage in your heart to actually correct or criticize whatever it might be that feels a bit more negative. But man, encouragement is just so necessary, particularly when everyone's like giving such a personal part of themselves, being vulnerable and really giving from the heart. Greg, Hanna, anything to add along those lines? Or perhaps you have a completely different take on the subject.
Greg, you go first, and then I'll respond.
All right. Yeah, I think I don't feel the freedom. So I think that encouragement should be our main way of communicating. Excellent. When it comes time for criticism, I don't feel the freedom to give criticism to people. I don't even know if I like the word, but unless it's good news in my heart. So sometimes I've seen something inside of people that I don't think is helpful for them, for their relationship with God or for their leadership. Sometimes it's taken me years to say it because I knew in my own heart I had a mixed agenda. And it was a lot about me and not really about them. And so I find that I have to pray, have compassion. And then when I know in my heart that this is good news for them, then criticism can feel like encouragement to people. So I can tell when that's going well is that people will say after that, thank you for that. Thank you, that was really helpful. And if they don't say thank you and they walk away beaten up, then I know that there was still a lot of me in there that was muddying the waters and didn't allow it to be good news. So I see both encouragement and constructive feedback to both be expressions of the gospel. And if it doesn't come across as good news, then it I'm just not sure it was worth saying. So
that was quite possibly one of the most Canadian answers that I think I've ever heard.
I don't even know if I like that word. I was like, that's Canadian.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Great.
Love it.
With a man with an Oregon State T-shirt on.
That's
great.
right.
Yeah.
That was so nice.
Was it? Good.
Yeah.
Super nice.
Yes.
Super good though.
It's
I
all
think
great. Yes. Super polite.
I think it's super Canadian, I guess. Super Greg, super great. Because I find myself at times, trying to feed back to someone and realizing like how much of this is me trying to help the person out of like a sincere place of love versus like what you're doing right now is just kind of annoying to me. And I'm correcting you out of some sort of sense of like annoyance or indignation, which isn't like helpful at all. It's just, it is about me and it's mean.
Yeah.
So I took this question a little bit differently. I read it in the sense of how do I balance criticisms or encouragements brought to me? Because as a leader, you do have people who look up to you, and I take that very seriously. Like I want to be responsible with whatever platform or leadership position I have, whether that is scrubbing dishes in the bathroom or in the kitchen, cleaning toilets, or if I'm on stage leading worship. Like there's a position there that I have, and I read the question a little bit differently, so I'll respond the way that I perceived it, and maybe someone else who asked the question or is thinking of this is thinking it in the same way. But what Greg, you were saying about motive, like that's what it all comes back to for me, and then just my security and my identities. Because if someone's going to come to me and start to praise what I've done or how I sound or how whatever, you guys know, like, oh, that was a great sermon or whatever, my identity still has to be in Jesus Christ, or else I'm going to take the glory for that onto myself. The same way if someone comes to me with a criticism or constructive feedback or something, if I'm going to take that identity as my own and I'm Hanna, I'm not the Lord's daughter, then that's going to hurt me a lot. And I might come back with a defensive answer rather than the gospel, which is grace. And that's the gift that we function in and we want to give to other people. So I read the question that way. And if I'm focusing on that in a lens of grace, then my response will be different. And if I'm living my life in that, on that road, right, then it's going to create a culture around me, so that what Seth was saying about being approachable to give and receive, that it just fills up the buckets and allows for more space and allows for more leadership, availability, and accessibility. But
It's great. It's really good. It's a good angle. Okay. We might have time for one, maybe two, probably not. One more question. And I think we've kind of been building up to this, or at least touching on it. But the question is simply, how do you stay humble as a leader? And I would add to it, like, why is that even a thing? Is it important? If so, how do we stay humble as a leader? Seth, you want to start?
Yeah, how to stay humble. I don't know that I've ever thought very deeply about like that phrasing of it. How to stay humble. Read the Old Testament a bunch and allow that to terrify you a little bit, about, when leaders go wrong and the consequences it can bring on people. That's not a thing. I think that I don't know if I have a great answer to that. I think that I'm always trying to make sure that I'm not trying to accomplish the kinds of goals that are that within my scope or abilities or strengths. I really feel like part of my job as a leader is to be deeply connected to God in such a way that his heart and his problems like actually weigh on me. And I think once you start dealing with God-sized problems, they really humble you. Like they really, you realize they're so much bigger than you, that I think it puts you in that greater level of dependence with God. I think, one of the things just to be proud is you have to have really small problems, to be proud, to feel like you can handle it or you're doing a good job at handling it. That's kind of one of the things that at least comes to mind. I'm sure there's probably a better answer than that. But I think that's a big thing. Let God give you his God-sized problems that you actually require God for. And it'll put some humility in you. And I'll start with that.
That's great. Okay. Greg, what would you say?
It doesn't seem hard because,
well, not for you.
if you in any way know yourself at all, it's quite embarrassing.
Indeed.
The idea of being, humble doesn't seem, it's only if you're super successful or something. So the classic idea of humility, I just am very aware of my shortcomings. And but here's the thing that's harder for me is the false humility. And maybe you guys can even joke about it as being Canadian, but it's this idea of shying away from taking responsibility, or no, really, it was nothing really, and which is equally self-absorbed than being kind of more overtly proud. And so I find that I struggle more with the false humility idea than I do. It's easy to just be self-deprecating, but it's really just drawing attention to yourself. And so I find that what humility looks like for me is just caring about other people. And this moment really isn't about me, and I don't need to make it about me. And then it goes back to what Hanna was saying, just about her identity in Christ and being defined by that. So that's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah. Greg, it sounds to me like like you're describing insecurity. Would you say that like that's the root of false humility or pride? Or is that, I mean, how would you kind of connect those things?
Yeah, I would probably call it self-centeredness, but I think that that pride just has a way of making every moment about self. And whether I'm putting myself down or lifting myself up, it's still being about me. And I think that my identity in Jesus needs to set me free from that. And of course, we're all in that journey. So, yeah,
that's great. How about you, Hanna? What would you add?
Just simply for me, I'm with Greg. Like I'm very aware of where I've come from, and so that is by God's grace, I'm here right now. And if it's in his hands. But the one thing that I remind myself of over and over again, and this is just really a drive from me in leadership, regardless of what role I'm in, I want to train and lead people so that they can do it better than I do it. So in that sense, I will always know, oh yeah, she's going to be better than me. There's no way I can fluff myself up, because I want to create a better, like what you were saying, like there's something before me, there was something before me, I'm just here, and then there's going to be something after me. And the legacy you leave can be one that drives like more gospel, more Jesus, more following. And you can do that if you have the mindset that I want to leave this better than I found it, and I want them to do it better than I did it. And you can't do that by yourself. You can't do that with the false humility or the pride or the ego. You have to do that with Jesus.
Yeah,
that's
really good.
Yeah. If I ever feel like in a moment of insecurity, like, oh, she's really good or he's really good, well, by God, like, that's amazing. Thank you, Jesus. And I got to be a part of that. And now they're going to go off and do great things. And I got to be a part of that little piece of the story. And that's a beautiful thing. That's a gift. So
it's really good.
That's really good. My answer would be twofold. Number one, I find that I get very uncomfortable around leaders who I really look up to. Even every time I get around Greg, you and Seth in particular, Hanna, you and I interact on a weekly basis, often more. And I get around you two, and I told you guys this before, but I look up to you in a lot of ways as leaders. I enjoy you guys as friends, but I find that the more I surround myself by people who I reckon have a lot to learn from, it helps me to keep perspective. And there is the temptation, I find, because I do struggle with insecurity a lot, and I hope I don't. When we start talking about this stuff, I think, oh gosh, am I just being like, is this just false humility, or is this like something? Am I just being vulnerable? Whatever it is, I find there's this temptation to like want to just surround myself with people that I feel like are slightly just a notch or two below where I'm at, and that's more comfortable. I feel like I've got an edge. I'm the confident man in the room. But when I sort of push myself out of that place and take advantage of the opportunities that I have to be around some leaders that I really, really look up to, it just immediately, I feel like I'm being infused with humility. Like, just remember, that I still have a lot to learn. And I find the more that I surround myself with great leaders, the more that I am able to do that. The second thing that I would say is I'm learning how to preach the gospel to myself all the time. This kind of maybe goes back to what you were saying a little bit, Seth, just on a very, very grand scale. I find that the more I remind myself of just how big God is and how I'm not leading in my current leadership role because somehow I've really, really impressed God, and he needs my skills. And so therefore he's put me in this position to just be awesome and give him glory somehow. when in fact I don't deserve to be here at all. God loves me, and it's so incredibly wonderful and humbling that he would send his son to die for me. And I know that might sound kind of cliche, but I'm realizing that the more I learn to recite God's story, preach the gospel to myself every day, it helps me to be secure in who he says he is, and to be really, really humble, because I'm not grasping for identity anyplace else. I don't have to compare myself to anyone. I don't have to impress anyone. I'm the king's son, for God's sake.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, guys, we did not get to question number 7. I'll say it, but we're not going to dive into it because we will need another hour. The question was, we actually put it on here: what is Grace City's position on female leaders, teachers, preachers, etc., and why? I was going to actually give that one to you, Hanna, but we are out of time. So,
Funny.
I'm kidding. We actually, I will say this. We have some incredible women leaders in our churches, and I want to, in all seriousness, I want to actually just affirm Hanna and some of the other women leaders in our church. We are absolutely blessed to have some incredible leaders who I think exemplify the very heart of God and the way that they relate to Jesus and lead like him. So it was a great question, and next time we'll get into it next time. But guys, since we are out of time, are there any just final thoughts before we sign out? Any last bits of advice?
I wouldn't mind just saying, Simon, how much I appreciate you and the way that you lead. And I find that you do lead from a place of humility. You have this amazing ability to turn us all toward Jesus. And I'm really humbled by that and inspired by it.
Thanks,
so thank you for letting me be a part of this.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Cool. Seth, final words?
Thanks for having me.
Good.
And I wish I could see all you beautiful Portland faces. Love you guys. Think about you guys. Pray for you guys. And yeah, I affirm everything that Greg's saying, Simon. Really respect you and
Thanks,
appreciate
guys.
everything you and Hanna and the rest of the team up there is doing. And I can usually barely tolerate being in meetings with Greg Mitchell, but you know, this one we made it through. So it's all a
It
win.
wasn't just me, that's why. There's more of us. And so.
Proud of
The feeling
myself
was
tricking you
mutual.
guys to be in a Zoom call together.
Simon,
All right.
we'll stay on after this and pray for both of them.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's right.
Good idea. All right, guys, we do have to get going. Thank you again, Greg, Seth, and Hanna, as always. Appreciate you guys being with us. See you soon. Everyone
You guys.
else, thanks for joining us
Care.
tonight. Love you. Have a great
Bye
night.
now.